you have to look at what your investors are asking for. So one of our clients, they're a seed series startup. Their investors explicitly said to them, if you don't double your revenue, then we're not gonna give you a Series A. So they're like, okay, we need to double our revenue. How do we do that? And for them, since they're a product-led company, the answer was hiring engineers. For other companies who are sales-led companies, the answer would be hiring go-to-market talent. So you've got to look at where your revenue is coming from, you've got to look at where your investment's coming from, and you've got to look at what roles will move the needle to allow you to get to where you need to go.
AI needs a lot of data. And if you traditionally look at how recruiting has been done, of course, there is a certain amount of tactical data that is there in systems, but it is still not leveraged probably in the last, let's say, in a couple of decades the way it should have been. And of course, some of the tools that are being used also, especially in the recruiting space, are fairly old tools. They're not AI first, they're not AI ready. For AI systems to work in the first place, you need really high quality data, which is going to help AI systems to make better decisions.
We as recruiters are going to be pushed to be the absolute best in the business. Like I think 90% of recruitment businesses are going to go out of business because if you're not in the top 10%, as we do continue to replace humans with robots, you're just not going to be the selected headhunter for these companies who do have to make those high-level strategic hires. So I think it all starts with looking at your current workforce, seeing what can we automate, and then what does that free us up to actually produce with the people that we do have on our team.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Hyreo Rise series of podcast. Today, we've got a very interesting guest, Julia. She comes with over a decade of experience in recruiting, specialized recruiting in tech, startups, go-to-market profile. She's done a whole lot of very, very interesting recruiting in the last few years. She is the founder and CEO of Aligned Recruitment company. A pleasure to have you, Julia, on the conversation today.
Thank you. It's so good to be here. Thank you for having me. I'm so excited.
A little bit of an introduction about yourself for the audience would be lovely, Julia.
Absolutely. Yes. So I am the CEO and founder of Aligned Recruitment. Hi, everyone. My name is Julia Arpag. We started the business about 2 years ago, and I've been recruiting ever since 2013. But I shifted into tech recruitment specifically about 5 years ago. And then when I started the business, we went all in on working with tech startups. So we most frequently hire for engineering and go-to-market talent, because obviously those are the two biggest buckets that tech startups normally need help with. So that's what we do. It's been a wild ride. We've closed nearly $1 million in revenue in under 2 years in business. Very, very grateful, very excited, really, really excited to be here.
Lovely. Thank you so much. I had a lot of questions about Align, but I'll keep it for another session. But thank you so much again, Julia, for joining in. So for today, everybody on the audience, we're going to talk about something which is very, very critical, especially the way businesses are kind of evolving in the last, I would say, 12, 18 months. We're going to look at it from the commercial angle of recruiting. How do we measure the ROI of recruiting? Are there ways in which we could look at effective cost reduction without really, falling back on quality or the experience as far as recruiting is concerned? I think in one of our earlier conversations, we spoke a little bit about this, Julia. Two primary concerns that most talent leaders across the world today are looking at. One is, how do you redefine the talent strategy with all what's happening in tech and around? Second thing is cost. Everybody's talking about reducing the cost of operation. So let me start with that. Broadly, we're going to talk a lot more about the total cost of ownership of recruiting today. But let me first ask you, how do we define total cost of ownership? And in your view, especially when you're working with early stage startups, B, C, series startups, what are those market pressures which are essentially driving this cost optimization? We'll define it, and then we look at what are the parameters that you've seen, impacting the cost.
That's a great question. So I think the market factors are, for an investor-funded startup, you have to look at what your investors are asking for. So one of our clients, they're a seed series startup. Their investors explicitly said to them, if you don't double your revenue, then we're not going to give you a series A. So they're like, okay, we need to double our revenue. How do we do that? And for them, since they're a product-led company, the answer was hiring engineers. For other companies who are sales-led companies, the answer would be hiring go-to-market talent. So you've got to look at where your revenue is coming from. You've got to look at where your investment's coming from, and you've got to look at what roles will move the needle to allow you to get to where you need to go.
Right. So, when you talk about, funded startups, of course, they have a very, very different way of looking at it because, as you rightly said, revenue is critical. Then we go after that, right? But we've seen in the industry, if you look at slightly bigger enterprises also doing this, a lot of cost cutting, reduction in headcount, a lot of short-sighted, maybe immediate certain wins, but long-term not all that great for the brand and for the company. Do you think there are ways in which we could still reduce cost overall without reducing the candidate experience or the quality of hire, let's say?
Absolutely. That is such a good question. So I actually love the movement towards AI and using robots to replace redundant human work. So the day we're recording this, just yesterday, Microsoft announced a 6,000 person layoff, which I personally think is a move in the right direction as a workforce. I think it makes perfect sense to have AI perform the tasks that are repetitive, mundane, boring, not as important, I shouldn't say not as important, not as creative or thoughtful. And then that frees up humans to do the work that is actually the most interesting and the most compelling. So what I'm excited about is that those companies are going to become more profitable. And we as recruiters are going to be pushed to be the absolute best in the business. Like I think 90% of recruitment businesses are going to go out of business because if you're not in the top 10%, as we do continue to replace humans with robots, you're just not going to be the selected headhunter for these companies who do have to make those high-level strategic hires. So I think it all starts with looking at your current workforce, seeing what can we automate, and then what does that free us up to actually produce with the people that we do have on our team.
Great. Now that you spoke about AI, I'm tempted to ask this question. For sure, AI in the current context of how the world is looking at it, it has got huge potential. There's no question about that. You talked about the example of Microsoft. We've seen many companies which are essentially automated certain parts of their functions, including HR. IBM had a huge article in terms of HR processes being impacted heavily by bots and agents in some way or the other. But we all know that it's not a magic bullet today. I mean, there's certain advantages, there's certain potential it has shown as a technology, but there is a long way to go in terms of using that. But as a practitioner, have you seen, although there has been certain progress made by automating, things like screening, maybe scheduling, AI-powered chatbots doing first-level interactions, etc. But do you think, where do we think we are in this whole process? I mean, have we really reached where it needs to be, or you see tremendous improvement in the coming years?
That's a great question. So in the recruiting industry, I think the best uses of AI are on the sourcing side. So helping you create Boolean strings, helping you research companies. Like we use ChatGPT 100 times a day in my company in terms of pulling competitors of the companies that we're hiring for, in terms of pulling lists of kind of top search terms to use within different industries and for different candidates. I also think AI is really effective with note taking. So recruiters, obviously, we have to have extensive notes to share with our clients about the candidates we're speaking with. So I use Firefly's AI and Granola AI. Both have been amazing note-taking apps that we've loved. Where I think a lot of companies are misstepping is with using AI to screen candidates. I think that is a terrible candidate experience. I think you alienate your top talent, and I think it just does not set the tone for a candidate-centric recruitment process. And I think that can cost you on the back end when you're hoping to make an offer to someone who was turned off at the very beginning by being screened by a robot instead of a human. I think you cannot automate the humanity of recruitment.
Right. And I think, one of the challenges that AI has, and as somebody who comes from the technology side, trying to build on the recruiting text landscape, AI needs a lot of data. And if you traditionally look at how recruiting has been done, of course, there is certain amount of tactical data that is there in systems, but it is still not leveraged probably in the last, let's say, couple of decades the way it should have been. And of course, some of the tools that are being used also, especially in the recruiting space, are fairly old tools. They're not AI first, they're not AI ready. For AI systems to work in the first place, you need really high quality data, which is going to help AI systems to make better decisions. Even screening, even we talk about bias, we talk about having a great conversation with a candidate, be it a voice or a chat or a text sort of an agent that you're talking about, right? Is this legacy corporate culture essentially to be blamed? Is that causing really inertia? Is that really impacting the adoption of AI and AI becoming more and more effective on the ground?
That's a great question. I think part of it is legacy culture. I think part of it, especially for startups, is cost, right? Like there's a huge time and financial cost to implementing AI tools. You have to have someone who is dedicated solely to researching and then implementing. And that is very costly. So I think a lot of companies are like, well, if it's not broken, let's not fix it. And I'm sure most companies have already implemented a handful of AI tools. There's infinite AI tools they could implement. So a lot of it is they just have to be choosy about where they invest that time and resource as far as their internal team. And so that's what I think probably could be a blocker.
Right. Now, without data, I'm pretty sure that we're going to struggle with a lot of the AI decision making, being operational on the ground, etc. Right. Now, since we are in the context of discussing all this from a cost perspective, Julia, another in the last at least a few years, one of the things that we've seen enterprises, mid and large and very large as well, adopting is looking at shared services. Now, if you take recruiting as a function, and if you're having fairly large volumes of hiring being done, you need sourcing skills, you need screening capability, you need records, recruiting operations skills, you need back office skills. You have multiple kind of functions that essentially roll up under recruiting as a function. And because of that, a lot of organizations have tried out having shared services, doing some part of that, but in a very specialized manner. You have resources who are really specialized in joining, onboarding, background verification, screening, et cetera, and sourcing becomes a entirely different function. Have you experienced this? Have you seen the benefits? Do you recommend? Have you your 2 cents on that?
Are you asking if I think it's beneficial to implement AI whenever possible with all of those back-end operations? Yes, 100% I do. I will say though, the caveat is, in my experience, I've seen that you really do have to have an operations manager who's overseeing all of that. So for us internally, we have an amazing operations manager who oversees all of our AI implementation, and that's been massive for our growth as a business. And that's my best advice to the companies that I work with who are feeling overwhelmed, like, man, we'd love to automate more, but how? I say, I'm a recruitment agency, so I can just do that for you, right? Like we have the processes baked out. But then part of what we do is advising and consulting. So we say, listen, if it's not a realistic long-term solution for you to partner with us, then we very much have an abundance mindset as a business. There's always going to be more than enough for all of us. So I have no problem teaching my clients how to recruit, how to automate as much as possible so that you can personalize the rest. I've lent our expertise in that way and been very happy to give that to our clients. Like for one of our most recent clients, we literally built out a standard operating process for them to replicate the exact recruitment process that we did for their engineering team, because I want them to be empowered with that information, whether they work with us in the future or not.
Lovely. In fact, Julia, one of the things that we offer to our customers as a product as well as a service really is, how do we automate a lot of these recurring tasks, as we call it, where what we falls under the records or recruiting operations, be it sending follow-up, scheduling, a little bit of screening or pre-screening, if I may, post-selection support, onboarding support, etc. We've been providing that, and we've got some really, really good traction in that space. Now, With your experience as a recruiter, as somebody who's seen fairly complex recruiting projects being undertaken, any recommendations for us on that? Anything that you feel would make such a service even better for customers?
That's a good question. I would say speed. Like, obviously you charge customers for your service, right? So to make it worth what you're charging, you just need to make sure that you're able to implement it quickly, answer any issues that come up quickly. That's been our biggest frustration with dealing with new products or new services, is that implementation isn't always handled super well. So that's the number one way that you guys can set yourselves apart in the business, for sure.
Right. Speed. I think I like that specifically because in the context of recruiting operations, speed probably is the most important thing there, right? Now, if I was to summarize, really, we spoke about cost being a absolutely important factor. Most talent leaders are looking at cost. We looked at AI, a little bit of caution on AI. Some places you might still want to have a human connect than having robots or agents actually doing that. Data being super important for doing that. Shared services could be an effective way of cost reduction, right? But what does it mean in the long term, Julia? Where are we heading from here? You have on one side specialist sourcing, RecOps expert. On one side, you have AI coming in with all its benefits. You have shared service models that organizations are looking at. Many of these obviously have cost advantages and higher value to the organization, right? What's your closing comments on all of these? And also any practical advice to talent leaders, talent acquisition leaders, especially in the today's context of business?
Absolutely. My closing comment is just, you've got to be adaptable. Like, maybe we'll do another podcast in a year and I'll be like, hey, this amazing AI screening tool is on the market and now we use it. Like, we found an amazing way to pre-screen candidates that we feel very comfortable with. So I think just staying humble, staying flexible, staying adaptable, being willing to try new tools and try new things as they come out on the market. But then I think what really sets me apart as a recruitment founder, I've gotten this feedback from every single client, is that we are hyper personalized and we do offer a white glove service. And that's where I think you can get down a slippery slope if you prioritize money over everything else. Like, there are way cheaper recruitment firms than us, right? Like, if your North Star is to go with your cheapest partner, you're probably going to get what you pay for. So what I would recommend is, as a TA leader, look at where you're going to get the best ROI on your spend. And that's going to be a recruitment firm that has the personal touch, is flexible and adaptable, uses AI tools whenever it makes sense to support you and to support the candidates, and just stay open.
Lovely. That's a great way to close it, Julia. My takeaway from whatever we discussed today is, irrespective of what we say in terms of cost, be strategic. Look at value over short-term cost or otherwise, especially in functions like talent acquisition, where you are really, really focused on getting the smartest talent in the market. I think you got to be very, very wise in using tech, using AI, retain the human aspect to it, and get in the specialist sort of best person that you can get to really assist you in running the operations for you.
Agreed.
Thank you so much, Julia. Once again, always a pleasure interacting with you, talking to you. Look forward to one more conversation probably later in this year, where we're going to talk more about the operational aspects of some of what we discussed today. Thank you so much, Julia, for joining us today.
Thank you. Good to be here.